The planet Dravaris was a quiet and distant world, covered with gray mountains and silver clouds that never seemed to move. The air was thin and dry, and the wind made a low humming sound as it moved through the ancient stone valleys. It was a place where very few people lived, except for a small human research team who had come to study the remains of a long-lost alien civilization. Lily Harper sat by the window of the landing shuttle as it descended toward the surface. She pressed her hand against the glass, watching the sharp peaks rise below like the bones of a sleeping giant. Her father, Daniel Harper, stood beside her, holding a data pad in one hand and looking more serious than ever. He was the lead archaeologist of the team, and this mission was his life's work. Lily was only 12, but she had already traveled to more planets than most adults on Earth. Her father had taken her with him on his missions ever since her mother passed away years ago. He said he didn't want to leave her alone, and Lily didn't mind. Every new world was a mystery, full of strange things to see and sketch in her little notebook. When the shuttle landed, the door opened with a hiss, and warm air rushed inside. The ground was made of dark red stone, cracked and dusty. A tall gray fortress stood not far away, half buried in sand. Its walls were covered with faded carvings that looked like writing, but no one could read them. The fortress was old, so old that even the machine scanning it couldn't tell how long it had been there. Lily followed her father and the other scientists toward the base camp. There were 6 people in total, including a quiet engineer named Nora, who always smiled kindly at Lily, and a pilot named Jack who liked to tell her stories about the stars. They set up tents and equipment near the fortress, connecting cables and scanners to the stone walls. Lily wandered around, her eyes full of wonder. The walls seemed to whisper when the wind passed through the cracks. She traced one of the carvings with her finger. It looked like a mix of circles and curved lines, almost like a picture of wings. She smiled and pulled out her sketchbook, trying to copy it. Daniel called to her from across the courtyard. "Stay where we can see you, Lily. This place hasn't been checked for safety yet." "I'm just drawing," she called back, waving her pencil. Her voice echoed softly against the stone. Inside the fortress, the scientists worked for hours scanning the walls and digging around the edges of the structure. They found no doors, only narrow windows and endless hallways carved into the rock. The deeper they went, the stranger the symbols became. Some of them seemed to glow faintly when light touched them, like tiny reflections of fire. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, the base camp lights flickered on. The team gathered for dinner around a metal table. The air smelled faintly of dust and heated rations. Daniel talked about the carvings. "They're definitely a language," he said, "but it's not like anything we've seen before. The patterns repeat, but there's no clear structure. It's almost like music." "Music?" Jack asked, raising an eyebrow. Daniel nodded slowly. "The spacing, the rhythm. It's like whoever carved them was trying to make the stone sing." Lily listened quietly, her chin resting on her hands. She imagined the fortress long ago, filled with voices and firelight, maybe even dragons like the ones in her storybooks. She smiled to herself. Maybe those carvings really were songs for dragons. After dinner, Lily went back to her tent. She turned on her small lamp and took out her crayons. On the last page of her notebook, she began to draw the fortress. The walls looked so big, so lonely. She added little stars around them, then a small dragon sitting on top of one tower. She gave it big, kind eyes and a tail that curled like a question mark. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying a soft humming sound through the night. The lights from the base cast long shadows on the stone walls. Somewhere deep inside the fortress, a small spark glowed for the first time in centuries, then faded back into darkness. Lily yawned and closed her notebook. She didn't see the faint shimmer that passed across the wall of her tent, tracing the shape of the dragon she had drawn. She only smiled and whispered, "Good night, little dragon," before falling asleep. Far away, under the old fortress, something ancient stirred, something that had been waiting for a very long time to be remembered. The morning sun rose slowly over the rocky hills of Dravaris, turning the sky pale gold. The research camp was already busy with activity. Machines hummed, Scanners blinked, and voices echoed softly against the ancient stone walls. Lily woke up to the smell of warm food and the sound of Nora's cheerful voice calling everyone for breakfast. Lily stepped outside her tent, rubbing her eyes. The air was cool and smelled like metal dust. Around her, the fortress walls stood tall and silent, as if they were listening. She walked toward her father, who was studying a screen filled with symbols. He looked tired but excited. "Morning, Dad," she said with a sleepy smile. "Morning, kiddo," he replied, handing her a cup of warm tea. "We found something interesting last night. There's a hidden chamber under the main hall. We'll open it today." Lily's eyes lit up. "Can I come?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Only if you promise to stay close to Nora. It might not be safe." Lily nodded quickly. "I promise." After breakfast, the team gathered near the center of the fortress. The ground was uneven, covered with dust and faint lines carved deep into the stone. The engineer, Nora, set up a small cutting tool that glowed blue at the edges. Slowly, she traced a perfect circle around one of the carvings. The ground trembled, and a hidden door slid open, revealing a staircase leading down into darkness. Daniel switched on his helmet light. "All right, let's see what secrets you're hiding," he murmured. They descended carefully. The air grew warmer and heavier the deeper they went. The walls around them were covered with the same strange symbols Lily had seen before, but now they glowed faintly, like the soft light of a candle. It felt as if the fortress itself was waking up to greet them. At the bottom of the stairs was a wide hall. Massive pillars rose up to a ceiling lost in shadows. In the center stood a stone platform covered in thick dust. On it lay several circular patterns that looked like scales or wings. The air buzzed faintly with static energy. "This is incredible," Daniel whispered. "It's like a temple." Jack walked around the platform, shining his light on the carvings. "You think this is where they buried something?" "Not buried," Daniel said softly. "Preserved." Lily stood beside Nora, clutching her sketchbook. She couldn't stop staring at the glowing lines on the walls. They seemed alive. She opened her notebook and began to copy them, tracing each curve and swirl. The patterns reminded her of the doodles she used to make back home, only more elegant. While the adults took samples and readings, Lily's curiosity led her to a smaller hallway that branched off from the main chamber. The air was cool and still, and her footsteps echoed softly. At the end of the corridor, she found a smooth wall covered in faded symbols. She sat down cross-legged, opened her box of crayons, and began to color around them. She drew stars, flowers, and small dragons flying between the symbols. The crayons squeaked gently on the stone. For a moment, the colors looked too bright against the dull gray wall, then faded slightly as if the stone was absorbing them. She tilted her head, frowning. "Weird," she muttered. Behind her, a soft pulse of light spread across the carvings, then vanished. Meanwhile, Daniel and the others continued studying the main chamber. Their scanners showed small bursts of energy under the surface. "It's reacting to something," Nora said. "But I don't know what." Jack looked around. "Could it be us?" Daniel shook his head. "No, the readings are rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat." Lily returned quietly before anyone noticed she had been gone. She didn't tell anyone about her drawings. She didn't want to get scolded for touching the walls. She sat beside Nora and pretended to help organize tools, but her mind kept drifting back to the colors and the faint pulse she had seen. As the day went on, the scientists grew more puzzled. The deeper they scanned, the more they found signs of energy buried beneath the stone. It wasn't mechanical, it was organic, pulsing softly like a living thing. By evening, everyone was exhausted. They returned to the surface to rest, leaving their equipment running through the night. Lily sat outside her tent, watching the fortress glow faintly under the twin moons. She held her sketchbook on her lap and whispered, "Good night, little dragons," before closing it. Deep inside the fortress, her colorful doodles glowed again for a brief moment. The light spread like veins through the walls, tracing paths that hadn't shone in thousands of years. Something ancient stirred, slow and patient, as if waking from a deep dream. The next day started quietly. The wind moved softly through the cracks of the fortress walls, carrying dust that sparkled faintly in the sunlight. The scientists were busy studying the new readings from their scanners. They had stayed up most of the night, watching the strange energy waves that came from under the fortress. Nobody could explain them. Lily sat on a stone block near the main hall, her legs swinging back and forth. She had finished breakfast early and was waiting for her father to finish talking with Nora and Jack. She opened her sketchbook again and flipped through her drawings. There were pictures of the fortress, the glowing carvings, and little dragons she had made up in her mind. She smiled and picked up her crayons. She walked over to the same wall she had colored the day before. The drawings were still there, faint but visible, like they had sunk slightly into the stone. She ran her fingers across them. The surface was smooth and warm, which was strange because the air around her was cold. Lily didn't think much about it. She took out a red crayon and began to add more shapes around the glowing carvings. She drew suns, clouds, and small people holding hands. Then she started to color over one of the large circular carvings that looked like a spiral. As she filled it in with bright colors, she noticed a soft vibration under her fingertips. The stone felt alive. Back near the camp, Nora looked up from her screen. "Daniel, are you seeing this?" she asked. Energy levels just spiked again. Daniel frowned and moved closer. "From where?" "Same source as before. The southern wall." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "That's where Lily was drawing yesterday." He hurried toward the fortress, calling out, "Lily, where are you?" Lily turned around as he entered the hall. "I'm here, Dad. Look what I made." She pointed proudly at the wall, now covered in bright red and yellow shapes. Before Daniel could answer, a flash of light spread across the surface. The carvings began to glow, their lines shifting and moving like rivers of fire. The colors from Lily's drawings seemed to melt into the ancient symbols, creating patterns that looked alive. Daniel pulled her back gently. "Stay behind me," he said firmly. The light spread up the walls and along the ceiling, forming circles and waves that pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. The entire fortress began to hum, deep and low, like the sound of a giant breathing in its sleep. Jack and Nora rushed in, wide-eyed. "What did she do?" Jack asked. "She was just drawing," Daniel said quietly, staring at the glowing walls. "Just drawing." The light dimmed slightly, leaving faint lines of gold glowing through the stone. The humming stopped, but the air still felt heavy with energy. Daniel crouched down beside Lily. "Sweetheart, did you touch the carvings before this happened?" Lily nodded slowly. "I was just coloring them. They looked sad. I wanted to make them pretty." Daniel took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said softly. "But we have to be careful, okay? These walls might be special." Lily looked at him curiously. "Special how?" He hesitated. "I don't know yet." That evening, the team gathered around the data console to review what happened. Nora showed them the recordings of the light surge. "It wasn't random," she said. "The energy followed a pattern, like it was responding to something external." "Like what?" Jack asked. "Like sound waves, maybe. Or—" She looked at Lily's sketchbook resting on the table. "Shapes." Daniel rubbed his chin. "So, the drawings triggered it?" "Possibly," Nora said, "but only hers. None of us have been able to reproduce it." Daniel looked over at Lily, who sat quietly by the fire, coloring in her notebook again. Her small hands moved gently, tracing new lines that formed the wings of another dragon. As the night deepened, everyone went to rest. The camp lights flickered softly against the stone walls. Lily placed her sketchbook beside her pillow and lay down. Outside, the wind carried a soft rumbling sound through the fortress. Deep beneath the ground, the old energy began to flow again. The colors from Lily's drawings pulsed like veins of light through the ruins. Somewhere in the depths of the fortress, a massive shape shifted. Scales of stone cracked, and eyes that had been closed for ages flickered faintly with fire. Lily slept peacefully, unaware that her simple doodles had begun to wake something ancient and powerful from its long sleep. The next morning began with a strange silence. The usual hum of machines was gone, and even the wind seemed to have stopped. The air felt heavy, almost expectant. Daniel Harper woke early, feeling uneasy. He stepped outside his tent and looked toward the fortress. The walls were glowing faintly, a soft golden light that pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. He called for Nora and Jack. Within minutes, the whole team was awake, gathering their equipment. The energy readings tripled overnight, Nora said, her voice tense. It's coming from under the fortress again. Daniel glanced toward Lily's tent. She was still asleep, clutching her sketchbook close. He didn't want to wake her yet. Whatever was happening, it had started with her drawings. He couldn't explain it, but he knew she wasn't in danger, at least not yet. They entered the fortress carefully. The air inside was warm and thick, like standing too close to a fire. The carvings on the walls were no longer faint. They glowed bright gold and orange, the light moving across them like flowing water. The floor trembled beneath their boots. Jack checked his scanner. There's movement below us. Something big. Mechanical? Daniel asked. Jack shook his head. I don't think so. It feels alive. A deep rumble echoed through the hall, making dust fall from the ceiling. The sound wasn't like machinery or shifting stone. It was more like a breath, slow and ancient. Nora stepped back, her eyes wide. Is that? Before she could finish, a beam of light shot across the chamber. The carvings on the walls connected, forming a massive glowing pattern that covered the entire room. Lily's colorful doodles were now part of it, merged perfectly with the ancient symbols. The shapes twisted and moved, forming images of wings, fire, and eyes. Daniel shouted, "Everyone out!" They ran for the exit, but the floor cracked open behind them, revealing a deep chamber filled with blinding light. A rush of hot air blasted through the corridor. The sound grew louder, turning into a roar that shook the fortress. Lily woke up at that moment, startled by the tremors. Her tent shook, and the ground vibrated beneath her. She ran outside, clutching her sketchbook. "Dad!" she called. Daniel turned as she appeared in the doorway. "Lily, stay back!" he shouted. But before he could reach her, the light in the chamber expanded, filling the entire fortress with golden fire. Then silence. When the light faded, they saw it, a shape rising from the broken floor. It was enormous, its body made of dark stone covered in glowing lines that pulsed like veins. Two massive wings unfolded, scattering dust and sparks into the air. The creature lifted its head, and molten eyes opened slowly. It was a dragon. For a long moment, no one moved. The dragon's head turned, its gaze landing on Lily. It tilted its head slightly, then lowered it until its glowing eyes were level with her. Lily's fear melted away. She felt warmth instead, not from fire, but from something alive and curious. Daniel reached out to pull her back, but Lily stepped forward slowly. She raised her sketchbook, showing the dragon one of her drawings. The creature let out a low, rumbling sound that almost sounded like a purr. The air shimmered around it, and for a moment, Lily thought she saw other shapes moving in the light, outlines of more dragons, smaller and faint, like ghosts waking from a dream. Nora whispered, "There's more of them." Jack's scanner beeped rapidly. Energy levels are off the charts. If this keeps up, the whole structure might collapse. Daniel looked at the dragon again. It's responding to her drawings. Maybe she can calm it. He turned to Lily. "Sweetheart, draw something peaceful. Something calm." Lily knelt down and quickly opened her sketchbook. With trembling hands, she began to draw a sunrise, soft colors, gentle clouds, and a dragon resting under a tree. As she finished, the dragon's glow dimmed. The trembling in the ground stopped. The dragon blinked once, then turned its head toward the sky. With a powerful beat of its wings, it sent a gust of wind across the valley. The sound echoed like thunder, then faded. Slowly, the dragon lowered itself again, curling its tail around the glowing floor. Nora whispered, "It's going back to sleep." Daniel watched as the dragon's light faded, its body turning still and silent once more. The golden glow on the walls dimmed, leaving only faint traces of Lily's crayon marks. Lily looked up at her father. "Did I do that?" she asked softly. Daniel smiled weakly. "I think you did, kiddo." As they left the fortress, the air was quiet again. The sun was rising over the hills, casting warm light across the ruins. But deep beneath the stone, faint golden eyes flickered one last time, watching, waiting. The morning after the awakening was calm, but everyone in the camp could feel that something had changed. The air around the fortress felt alive, charged with quiet energy. The stone walls still shimmered faintly in the sunlight, like they were breathing. The scientists moved carefully, speaking in low voices as they recorded data and repaired damaged equipment. Lily sat near the edge of the courtyard, her sketchbook open on her lap. She kept looking toward the hole in the fortress floor where the dragon had appeared. Her father had told her not to go near it, but she couldn't stop thinking about the creature's glowing eyes and the way it had looked at her. It hadn't been angry or dangerous. It had felt gentle. Daniel Harper was busy studying the new energy readings with Nora and Jack. The scanners showed strange pulses moving through the stone, almost like signals or a heartbeat. "Whatever that thing was, it's still connected to the fortress," Nora said. "It's dormant, but not gone." Daniel nodded. "Then we need to figure out what it wants." Jack frowned. "You think it's intelligent?" Daniel looked at the readings again. It reacted to Lily's drawings. It responded to her emotions. That's not just instinct. That's awareness. While they spoke, Lily wandered closer to the fortress wall. She ran her fingers along the carvings, tracing the curves and symbols. The stone felt warm under her touch again. Without thinking, she took out a blue crayon and began to draw small waves between the runes, filling the empty spaces. The light beneath the carvings flickered softly. She smiled. "Hello again," she whispered. A soft rumble came from deep within the fortress, gentle at first, then stronger. Daniel turned around immediately. "Lily, step away from the wall." But before he could reach her, the air shimmered, and the light spread once more. The ground shook, and the carvings began to move again, lines of energy racing toward the center of the courtyard. Dust rose into the air, and the deep rumble grew louder. Everyone backed away, shielding their eyes. From the glowing fissures in the floor, more shapes began to rise. They weren't made of flesh and blood but of stone and light. Their bodies were carved from the same material as the fortress, their wings etched with golden veins. One after another, the dragons emerged, 6 of them, each glowing with a different hue: blue, green, red, gold, white, and violet. Lily's eyes widened in awe. "They're beautiful," she whispered. The dragons spread their wings, stretching as if waking from a long dream. They made no sound, but the air vibrated with a deep, powerful hum that resonated in everyone's chest. Daniel and the others stood frozen, staring at the impossible sight before them. One of the dragons, smaller than the rest, lowered its head toward Lily. Its glowing eyes flickered softly. In her mind, she heard a calm voice. Not words, but feelings. Warmth, curiosity, gratitude. Nora's voice trembled. "Daniel, are they communicating with her?" Daniel didn't answer. He was too busy watching his daughter slowly step forward, fearless. The smaller dragon lowered itself further, and Lily reached out her hand. Her fingers brushed against its snout. The light brightened, and the dragon let out a soft rumble that made the air shimmer. In that moment, the walls of the fortress came alive. The carvings projected images into the air, scenes of the past. The humans watched in silent wonder as ghostly figures appeared. Tall, scaled beings with wings and long tails, building the fortress stone by stone. The dragons worked beside them, their fire breathing life into the structures. Together, they shaped the world. Daniel whispered, "They're showing us their history." The images shifted. The ancient beings and their dragons were at war with dark, shadowy figures that blotted out the stars. One by one, the dragons fell, sealing themselves in stone to protect their world. The last image showed the same fortress, glowing with light, then fading into silence. The vision ended, and the dragons turned their gaze back to the humans. Their eyes burned brighter for a moment, then dimmed. Lily felt a voice in her thoughts again, soft and clear. We waited for the dreamers. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the dragons began to fade. Their bodies turned to dust and light, flowing back into the carvings. The fortress grew quiet once more. The air was still warm, filled with a deep peace. Lily stood silently, her hand still raised. Daniel knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did something incredible, Lily," he said softly. She looked up at him. "They weren't angry. They were lonely." Daniel nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe that's why they waited for you." The golden light faded completely, leaving only the ancient carvings on the walls and Lily's colorful doodles. But somewhere deep in the stone, faint echoes of dragon voices lingered, humming softly. A song of gratitude for the little human who had reminded them how to dream. Night fell slowly over the ruins of the fortress. The stars came out one by one, bright and still against the dark sky. The camp was quiet except for the soft hum of the generators and the distant echo of the wind moving through the valleys. No one spoke much that evening. They were still trying to understand what they had seen, the dragons, the visions, and the strange message about the dreamers. Lily sat near the campfire, holding her sketchbook close. She turned the pages slowly, stopping on the drawings she had made before the dragons appeared. The colors looked different now, as if they held some faint glow of their own. She could almost feel warmth coming from them. Daniel sat beside her, watching the flames dance. He looked tired but thoughtful. "Dad," Lily said softly, "why did they call me a dreamer?" Daniel smiled a little. "I don't know. Maybe because you used your imagination. The dragons said they waited for dreamers. Maybe they meant someone who could see things differently. Someone who still believes in magic, even when everyone else has forgotten." Lily looked up at the stars. "Do you think they were alive? Like really alive?" "I think so," Daniel said. "But not in the way we understand life. They were made of energy, memory, and something older than time itself. They were what was left of a civilization's hope." Across the camp, Nora and Jack worked quietly, studying the data. The scanners still showed traces of energy flowing under the fortress, like streams of light buried deep underground. Nora adjusted her tablet and frowned. "It's not fading," she said. "If anything, it's growing stronger." Jack looked uneasy. "Stronger? You mean they might come back?" Nora nodded slowly. "Maybe not physically, but something is happening down there. It's like the planet itself remembers them." Daniel joined them and studied the readings. The data showed repeating pulses that matched a pattern, soft waves that seemed almost like breathing. "This isn't random," he said. "It's communication. They're still speaking, just in a different way." Nora turned to him. "Speaking to who?" Daniel glanced toward his daughter. "To her." Later that night, Lily couldn't sleep. She stepped outside her tent and looked up at the glowing fortress. The carvings were still dimly lit, the same color as starlight. She walked closer and placed her hand on the wall. It was warm again. Suddenly, her mind filled with images. She wasn't in the camp anymore. She was standing in a vast hall made of crystal and flame. The air shimmered with light. Around her stood the dragons, 6 of them, their eyes bright and kind. Their voices filled her thoughts, gentle and deep. "You carry the spark," one of them said. "The dream that wakes the memory." "What memory?" Lily asked aloud, her voice echoing softly. "The memory of fire," they answered together. "We were born from the hearts of stars, shaped by hands that believed in beauty and power. When darkness came, we gave everything to keep that fire alive. But the fire needs dreamers to survive. Without them, even stars forget to shine." Lily felt tears fill her eyes. "Are you gone forever?" One of the dragons leaned close. "No. We live where imagination burns." Every story, every dream, every act of wonder keeps us alive. You brought us back, little one, and others will follow your light. The vision began to fade, the dragon's shapes turning to sparks that drifted upward like embers. Their final words echoed in her heart. Never stop dreaming. The universe remembers. When Lily opened her eyes, she was back at the fortress wall. Her father stood nearby, watching quietly. He had seen the faint glow surrounding her. "You okay?" he asked gently. Lily nodded, wiping her eyes. "They talked to me, Dad. They said we have to keep dreaming." Daniel smiled softly, pulling her into a hug. "Then we will, Lily. Always." Above them, the night sky shimmered faintly, and for a brief moment, the stars looked like dragon wings spread wide across the heavens. The wind carried a warm breath through the valley, and the ruins glowed softly, holding the memory of fire that would never fade. The days after the vision were quiet but filled with a strange sense of purpose. The fortress no longer felt like a ruin. It felt alive, like something ancient was slowly waking up beneath the surface. The scientists had stopped treating it as a simple discovery. Now they approached it with respect, almost reverence. Lily spent her mornings sketching near the walls again, her crayons moving softly over the stone. She no longer drew random shapes. Her lines were careful and thoughtful now, as if she understood that every curve might mean something. Her drawings glowed faintly as she worked, responding to her touch. Daniel watched her from a distance, still amazed. He had seen many strange things in his career, but nothing compared to what his daughter had done. He felt proud, but also cautious. "She's just a child," he told Nora one afternoon. "I don't want her carrying the weight of something this big." Nora nodded. "She's not carrying it alone," she said. "We're all part of it now." The fortress had become a symbol. Messages had been sent to nearby research centers, and soon more teams arrived, scientists, historians, and even philosophers. They came to study the structure and the symbols, but the more they learned, the more they realized how little they understood. The dragon's story wasn't just ancient history. It felt like a message for the present. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Lily noticed something new. Her drawings on the walls were beginning to spread. Lines of light extended beyond where she had drawn, forming new symbols and patterns by themselves. It was as if the fortress was drawing with her. "Dad," she called out. "It's moving again." Daniel and the others rushed over. The lights pulsed gently, spreading across the walls in waves. The air filled with soft hums that blended into a melody. Then, as they watched, a projection formed in the air, an image made of pure light. It was a figure, tall and graceful, not human but not entirely dragon either. Its wings were transparent, its eyes like twin stars. When it spoke, its voice was calm and deep, echoing in everyone's mind. "Dreamers of Earth," the figure said, "you have reawakened the memory. The fire we kept safe is now yours to carry. Do not fear its light." Nora whispered, "It's talking to us." Daniel stepped forward. "Who are you?" The being smiled faintly. "We are echoes of those who came before, guardians of the bond between creation and wonder. Long ago, your kind helped build worlds with us. Together, we shaped the stars. But when darkness came, you forgot. You turned away from dreams. Yet one among you remembered." The being turned its gaze toward Lily. She froze but didn't look away. "You saw the world not as it is," it said, "but as it could be. That vision is the fire's breath." The being lifted a hand, and a soft light flowed toward Lily, wrapping around her like mist. The glow entered her sketchbook, making every page shimmer. "These drawings," it said, "will guide others to dream again." Daniel took a step forward. "What happens now?" The figure's form began to fade. "The dragons sleep once more, but their memory is alive within you. Protect it. Share it. The universe listens to dreamers." The light scattered, filling the night sky with streaks of gold and silver. Everyone stood in silence, watching until the last spark vanished into the stars. Lily looked down at her sketchbook, now glowing faintly in her hands. "They're gone," she said softly. Daniel knelt beside her. "No," he said with a gentle smile. "They're part of us now." As the night deepened, the fortress glowed with quiet warmth. The scientists packed up their equipment, but none of them felt like leaving. They knew they had witnessed something that would change everything. Something beyond science, beyond history. And somewhere deep inside the fortress walls, the faint hum of the dragon's song continued, soft and endless, echoing in the hearts of all who still dared to dream. The sun rose quietly over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and silver. The ruins of the fortress stood calm and bright, as if proud of the secrets it had finally shared. The camp was almost empty now. Most of the scientists had returned to their stations to report what they had seen, but Daniel and Lily stayed behind for one last day. Lily sat on a fallen stone near the courtyard, her sketchbook resting on her knees. She was drawing again, but this time her lines were soft and slow. The pages glowed faintly under her touch, like the light was alive inside the paper. Each time she finished a drawing, she smiled quietly to herself. Daniel stood nearby watching her. He had sent all the final data to the command center, but he wasn't thinking about research anymore. He was thinking about what the dragons had said, their message about fire and dreams. For the first time in a long while, he felt hope. Lily looked up from her sketch. "Dad, do you think people will believe us?" Daniel smiled softly. "Maybe not at first, but that's okay. The truth doesn't disappear just because someone refuses to see it. We'll tell the story, and maybe someday others will listen." She nodded, then went back to her drawing. Her crayon moved across the page, creating a picture of the dragons soaring above the mountains, their wings made of stars. She added herself standing below them, holding a tiny light in her hand. When she finished, the picture shimmered like the real thing. As the morning light grew stronger, the walls of the fortress began to glow again, not with the fierce light from before, but a soft, peaceful radiance. It spread slowly across the carvings, tracing every rune and line Lily had drawn. The glow moved like a wave until it reached the top of the highest tower. Daniel and Lily both looked up. The tower's tip shone brighter and brighter until it released a single beam of golden light into the sky. It rose higher and higher, cutting through the clouds until it vanished into the stars. "What's happening?" Lily whispered. Daniel watched in awe. "I think it's saying goodbye." The beam faded slowly, leaving behind a quiet warmth that lingered in the air. The fortress walls dimmed, and the carvings returned to still stone. But the feeling that filled the valley wasn't sadness. It was peace. Lily closed her sketchbook and stood. "They're really gone now, aren't they?" Daniel put his hand on her shoulder. "Not gone," he said softly. "They just moved where we can't see them. But their fire's still here." He touched his chest. "And here." He pointed to her heart. She smiled, her eyes bright. "Then I'll keep drawing. I'll make sure no one forgets." He nodded. That's exactly what they wanted. They stood together in silence for a while, watching the golden light fade from the horizon. Then Daniel packed up the last of their equipment, and they started the walk back to the shuttle that would take them home. As they reached the edge of the valley, Lily looked back one last time. The fortress stood bathed in the morning light, calm and timeless. For a brief moment, she thought she saw a faint shimmer above the tower. 6 dragon shapes gliding across the sky, glowing like fireflies against the dawn. She smiled and whispered, "Thank you." The wind carried her voice across the valley, gentle and warm. And though she didn't hear an answer, she felt one in her heart. A soft, endless hum that would stay with her forever. Years later, people would read the reports and see the data, but few would understand what really happened there. Only a handful would feel the truth hidden between the numbers. That somewhere out in the stars, dragons still dreamed, waiting for the next dreamer to awaken them again. And somewhere in a quiet studio on Earth, a grown-up Lily Harper would sit with her sketchbook, drawing dragons made of starlight and fire. Every line she drew glowed faintly, a promise kept between dreamers and dragons, the last light of their bond still shining bright.